can be a world of difference between a day 1 meta and a week 1 meta, but sometimes there's none. With us being a week into the WorldWalker expansion now, what I want to do is go back and take a look at the first 3 players to hit Masters on the America and European Shard once the season rolled over, all of whom did it in about less than 48 hours. My name is Boulevard here for Giant Slayer TV, and while the meta may have changed, may not have changed, I just want you to be able to take a look at what worked day 1, compare it to what's working now, and maybe give you a better idea of how you can take advantage of the day 1 meta in the future. Now, I'm not 100% sure the order in which these players hit Masters. That can be a little hard to keep track of. You know, you go and check, there's already 2 players, you don't know who was there first, but I am pretty confident in saying that Ace was the first player to hit Masters in the America Shard, which should surprise no one that consistently watches the America's ladder. Ace is known for sitting at rank 1 in the seasons in which they decide to play, and they decided to do it this time around with an old favorite in Afaelios. Now, there wasn't a big balance patch when we dropped the WorldWalker set. There were a few minor adjustments to Imperial Demolitionist and Crackshot Corsair, but Afaelios was left completely untouched. And there's even a new addition that Ace decided to throw in here in Bird the Bellringer, placing a chime on top of your deck and then randomly buffing one of the units in your hand. And there's a couple reasons that I think Ace went for this card. Number one is just that if you can buff an attach unit, that's a permanent buff. A 3/2 Rainbow Fish will go onto a unit, give it +3/+2. When it pops back off because the unit dies, you will still have a 3/2 Rainbow Fish. It can be a big difference maker in your damage output if you can high roll into something like that. The other reason, I believe, is that when we look at what we expect out of the WorldWalker Day 1 meta, it's probably going to be a lot of Jin Annie, right? So I think Ace just really wanted to up on the amount of 1-drops because we are still playing all 3 copies of Yordle Squire as well as Fizz, and now going up to 8 1-drops, not necessarily to play aggressively, but to play defensively against these other go wide sort of aggro decks that are looking to burn us out, just reduce the amount of unit damage that we take so that we can sort of negate the burn a little bit later on with Severum from Afaelios, and then Group Shot, another testament to just expecting these aggressive decks on day 1. So nothing too crazy here, just the best deck from the old meta coming in, doing it again, few minor updates. Next up, we have Team Hydra's BlackBoss, who had mentioned on Twitter that while they did most of their climbing with Poppy Tarek, a very BlackBoss deck, they couldn't quite cross the threshold past that point. They started getting countered. They swapped over to Afaelios Lux, and that is the deck that they used to actually cross into the Masters tier. As such, that is the deck that we will be highlighting and attributing to BlackBoss. This is a list that most Control diehards are going to be familiar with. Maytree from Team Ninetales finding a lot of success with this at the Seasonal. 4LW was a big fan and innovator of this deck, as was Drissoth. So if you've been on Twitter, you've probably seen this deck before. If you've watched tournaments, it pops up every now and then. And the big sort of update that this deck got was, of course, Celestial Trifecta. Now, if you have played Lux before, you know that sometimes you can just run out of 6-mana spells, and there's not a lot of 6-mana spells that are going to generate other 6-mana spells, which is something that the Trifecta can do. If you can play this and, you know, get a laser, take care of the board, shore it up a little bit next turn your opponent develops, you drop a Falling Comet on them, followed by another laser, and then, you know, to finish it off, let's Supernova, because I still have my low-end Celestial in hand to behold for that Supernova. You can just completely take over a game like that. And aside from that, I think that, again, when we look at just expecting a lot of burn day 1, it is really nice to have an Afaelios deck at your disposal so that you have this constant Severum access so that you can just heal back up. And apparently that is enough healing, as we've seen BlackBoss and many other Targon Demacia players just cutting star shaping in favor of Celestial Trifecta. I think with Lux it makes a lot of sense. It's really awkward to play all these 5-mana spells and then have to sort of round it out with a 2-mana spell when you have the opportunity to just cycle together 3 2-mana spells thanks to something like Afaelios. So I do really like the addition of the Celestial Trifecta. Now, I'm not convinced that this is the most optimized version of Lux Afaelios. The 3 Sunburst definitely feels like a very specific ladder tech for what Boss was running into in the Day 1 Diamond era, because it makes sense that if you are climbing that high on Day 1, you are seeing the same players over and over again. There's only so many of you in Diamond 2 through Masters, so probably just playing for a localized meta here, but definitely excited to see the evolution of Lux Afaelios as we go on, because this is my favorite deck for ladder right now. Just a big Petricite, Broadwing, and Afaelios fan. And rounding out our first 3 players into Masters on the America Shard, we again have another Team Hydra member, this time Dudu de Nunu, with another Demacia Targon deck, this time Pantheon, the most popular deck from the top 32 portion of our Curious Journey seasonal tournament. Pretty stock list here. Nothing too out of the ordinary. 3 Cataclysm is becoming a lot more standard in these lists. We're not seeing the one tech that I think a lot of people are really big on right now is actually Gifts from Beyond, giving you access to Severum or Infernum if you didn't find your Zenith Blade, maybe trying to help shore up the burn matchup a little bit. But it turns out that that wasn't a problem for Dudu to Nunu. Didn't feel like they needed any additional lifesteal and just ran through what I would call a very stock Pantheon list. All 3 ofs, 2 Concerted Strike, 2 Bastion. Really not too much to say here. Did just want to shout out Dudu to Nunu for being one of the first 3 players into Masters on the Americas chart. So congratulations to those 3, Dudu to Nunu, BlackBoss, and Ace, for being our first 3, giving us a glimpse into the day 1 meta, which was really just a leftover of the old meta. BlackBoss with Afaelios Lux, it's a little bit different, buffed up by the new set, but nothing new just yet. Now for the EMEA players, I do not know the order in which these players hit Masters. I just know that these were the first 3 to do it, so I will be presenting them in the order that my client has sorted them once I loaded in the deck list. So first up, we have Ross-Pierre Dole, who also played Pantheon Yuumi. A little bit of a different list from Dudu to Nunu, but it is still Pantheon. Get the Chain Invest tech. Again, tech choices for a localized meta like Blinded Mystic, like Golden Aegis. These are cards that Dudu elected not to run. And I know it's not exciting to see 2 Pantheon being some of the first 6 decks to hit Masters, but it is important to note that there is a decision-making process here. If you do want to be one of the first players to hit Masters, if that is your goal, you can't really be innovating day 1. You can't be playing with the new stuff. You need to stick to what you know, and these players knew Pantheon. It is important to note, though, that these were not the most popular ladder decks from the Curious Journey season in Pantheon and Afaelios. That was like Viego Shurima, Talia Ziggs, Feel the Rush. Those are not the decks that we're seeing being used to push through the early ranks. What we are seeing is decks that performed well at the seasonal tournament. So if you are looking to look at the next expansion and say, I want to be one of the first players in the Masters, don't just look at the ladder from the previous season, look at what actually performed in the seasonal tournament. I know it's not always the best overlap, but this time around, that seems to be the case. Next up, we have Tomc or Tomk. I'm not sure which one it is, but they hit Masters using Thralls, an old archetype that I'm sure a lot of people are excited to see come back. Not me, though. But a lot of people are excited to see this come back. And obviously, there were some new cards for it in the WorldWalker expansion. The most anticipated one probably being Harbinger of the Thralls. This little bird that can either summon a Thrall or advance your Thralls, so it doesn't feel too bad to draw it in the later stages of the game. Just sort of acting as another imagined possibilities. A card that I was never a fan of, but the Thralls enthusiasts disagree with me wholeheartedly on that one, so I will default to their expertise on that one because I don't play Thralls that often. But now you have 12 cards in this list that summon Frozen Thralls. You have the Frozen Thrall itself, you have the Harbinger, you have the Lysandra, so very consistent access pre-turn 3 to getting these Thralls down, but also going back to Draklorn Inquisitor, which again is one of those cards that a lot of people sort of argue about. Is this better, or are we supposed to be on Preservationist? This could be a plan for, now that I have more access to Thralls as a whole, I will have more Thralls on field more consistently. I want the Draklorn there to sort of count them down, whereas in the previous builds, you only played like 7 or 8 Thrall generators, not counting the Draklorn Inquisitor if you were on the Preservationist. So really, you were just trying to get off 1 promising future Thrall, get down 2 Thralls, kind of end the game from there. Now it looks like we have a more consistent access to going wide and summoning 3 or 4 Thralls at a time, and I think that's where the Draklorn is coming in over the Preservationist, or maybe it was just personal preference on the side of this player. And then another card that a lot of players were excited for is the Sands of Time. I know Mr. Emotional has been very against this card on Twitter, so if you want to look into the discourse, go check out Mo's Twitter. I'm sure you know where it is if you know what this channel is. Just giving -2 to the opponent's board and summoning or not summoning rather, but giving you a copy of Instant Sentry in hand so that you can immediately count down a Thrall by 4. And that does mean that the clock hand has been cut from the list. No more 8-drop. Let's just summon a Thrall by getting 8 countdown immediately. And a single copy of Buried in Ice. When Trundle Timelines really took over for a little while, we all kind of learned not just how good the Buried in Ice It That Stares combo is, but just Buried in Ice in general. And if you do have a lot of Overwhelm units, if you're going wider than your opponent with these large Thralls, then 1 Buried in Ice can be all it takes to just end the game immediately. They're only going to be able to develop 1 blocker. So this is what the updated Thralls looks like for the time being. Curious to see how this is going to shake out, if Thralls can make their way back into the meta in a big way, because it has been quite some time since this archetype was relevant. And finally, our last first-ish player to hit Masters from the EMEA shard, we have seasonal champion Tomas OW, who did it with Annie Jin, and sort of made the blueprint for a lot of people that were looking to net deck this if they got a late start. Now, I know that this has been a hotly debated archetype among the enthusiasts for it in regards to the best way to build the deck, so we're going to take a look at what Tomas actually used to be one of the first players to hit Masters, and the answer is number 1, Ravenbloom Conservatory. I know I've seen some discourse about whether or not this card belongs in the deck. Is it too slow? Are you not that kind of deck? Should you just be burning them out? Tomas elected to play it on day 1 to hit Masters, and I do want to point out that another European player, Pat, came into an opening weekend tournament with Annie Jin with no copies of Ravenbloom Conservatory, made it all the way to second place. So that is something that we are just going to have to sort of keep our eye on the evolution. Is this going to clearly come out as Ravenbloom is good or Ravenbloom is bad, or is it going to come down to player preference as time goes on? And then the other thing that I've seen a lot of players talk about is the amount of stuns that you want to be including, and Tomas really did not include that many. We have 1 copy of the Stagehand, 1 copy of Arachnoid Sentry, and no copies of Spellslinger. So Tomas just deciding that it was more worthwhile to go a little bit more burn heavy. I know Boom Crew Rookie is another card that I haven't seen in every single list, especially the stun heavy ones. They're more concerned with just stunning you out and going wide. And then, of course, we did include a couple copies of Sigil of Malice, the recently buffed sort of 3-mana Mystic Shot in Noxus, and just going a little bit more burn heavy. So wanting to get access to the Tibalt, buff up the burn spells, and not worry so much about stunning out the opponent's board and going in for unit damage, especially with the Spellslinger only being a 1/1, really not adding much to your overall damage potential from a board state. You know, once you stun the unit, yeah, that's great, you got a blocker out of the way, but as far as a unit, a 2-mana 1/1 is really not what you want to be putting in your burn deck, at least in Tomas's opinion, as he did go for a more burn-centric rather than stun-centric build. So this is what we found success with day 1. So go ahead and take a look at the ladder now. Go inspect your opponents on the top of the leaderboard. See what the Annie Jin looks like now. But this is what it looked like day 1, and you'll get an idea of how far we've come. And there you have it. Our first 3 players from the Americas and EMEA shards to hit Masters during the WorldWalker season. 2 Pantheon, 1 Afaelios, 1 Afaelios Lux, 1 Thralls, and 1 Annie Jin. No Alawi, no Bard. Maybe their time will come. Only time will tell. But if you go ahead and inspect the ladder these days, I'm sure it looks much different than what the players used day 1. But if you want to be one of the first players to hit Masters on your shard during the next expansion, the new season turnover, maybe take a look at what these guys did, sort of study it a little bit, say, okay, yeah, you know, maybe I shouldn't be innovating as much if this is the goal that I have. It's fine if you just want to play new decks on day 1, but you need to figure out which goals are more important to you. If you want to hit Masters, maybe you do have to go back for the old stuff, or maybe you don't, as Thomas OW highlighted with the Annie Jin. Figure out what works for you. In the meantime, I have been Boulevard for Giant Slayer TV. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the little bell icon to stay up to date on all the content that we post. Thank you so much for watching, and good luck in your climb to the WorldWalker ladder.